I'm going to go out of the shack now. And I'm going to do something a little different. Instead of starting the game, let I restart. How about I restart? Yes, I'm sure. Okay, so instead of starting the game with, you can see your 40-pound hammer here, I'm going to do something a little different. Now, just as by making the table on which the lawyer papers was placed de-emphasize the table, I'm going to emphasize an object. You can see here where it says, you can see your 40-pound hammer here. That is the default way that Inform 7 introduces an object. I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to come up here. Where do we have? Instead of your 40-pound hammer is in the North Woods, I'm going to move that hammer. Now here's where I've introduced the clearing. Now I could put your 40-pound hammer is in the North Woods. It doesn't matter to Inform 7 where I place this. It doesn't matter that it's after the introduction of the description of the forest clearing. But I'm going to change this to forest hammer is in the clearing. And I'm going to add a bit of text right here. I'm going to say, okay. Now when I run this game, I go south, and you see this text, your hammer stands where you left it, resting against the doorway. Now, this is the initial description of the object. When I take the hammer, taken, I look, it's not there anymore. Now watch this. I drop the hammer, and it no longer says your hammer stands where you left it resting against the doorway. That makes a lot of sense if I were to take the hammer, go back to the North Woods, drop hammer. Look, you wouldn't want this to say your hammer is resting where you left it against the doorway, because there's no doorway here in the North Woods. So, so the difference here is, instead of the description of the hammer is, if I did that, an error here. Description of the hammer is, let's see. Oh, because I've described the hammer elsewhere. Okay. All right. Here, let me, this is actually a good demonstration. I'm going to copy all this hammer stuff, and I'm going to put all of it near should probably put this up here. Yeah, okay. I'm going to put the description of the player, put the description of the player up pretty high, actually. Put it there. Makes sense. Keep things a little bit organized here. Okay. I want to say your 40-pound hammer is in the clearing, forest clearing. I guess I've already described the hammer here. So I'll just, okay, all right. Every so often I try something that doesn't work out. That probably was not as helpful as as I hoped it to be. All right, so I run that. Now we have south, and it just says you can see your 40-pound hammer here. What I want is to write Okay, so because that does not say the description of the hammer, now the first time that I see this hammer before I touch it, it'll say your hammer stands where you left it. I can examine it from here. Oops. I can examine the hammer from here, and you see this long text. Now, the point of interactive fiction is to interact with it. This is a fairly long bit of text. We've got the plain description of what the hammer is, and then I add a little bit of, this hammer invokes some memories. But I want to shorten this. I like this detail. I particularly like the bump of the hammer as you dragged it through the woods. So I want to keep that, but I do want to shorten this description a little bit. And one way I can do that is I'm going to break this description up. I'm going to say that there's I'm going to say there's a scorched handle that's part of the hammer. And I'm going to mention the scorched handle up here with the hope that the player might examine the scorched handle. And if we do examine the scorched handle, then we'll reward the player who has investigated it. So let's do, the description of the handle is, the scorch happened the same night Daddy gave you the hammer. There was a pounding at the door. So then I'm going to shift this pounding at the door and the angry voices. I'm going to remove that from the initial description of the hammer. And now, when we run this, south, take hammer, examine hammer, examine handle. That's just a bit of an Easter egg. I imagine most people probably won't examine the handle unless I do something like, here I might say something like this, I'll mention that scorch mark again. And now here we have the scorched handle, here we have the scorch mark, and of course, someone's going to type examine scorch mark. So let's add some synonyms because synonyms are awesome. Okay, so now we've broken this, what was a 5-paragraph description. There are 5 short paragraphs, but 5 little beats to that description. This first beat just tells you what it is, and then there's some memory there. Now we have this last bit of plot point describing what appears to be maybe a lynching or something like that. We don't really know in this story. But whatever it is, I'm kind of trying to establish that this character is trying to be optimistic. Let's examine me. He feels good, healthy, and strong, yet his environment is very sad. But he's trying to, he's trying to buck himself up. Nowhere am I saying something like, though you will live in a terrible, poor environment where you, have no hope of any kind of economic advancement, you are still cheerful. Nor do I announce that. I'm just trying to create an environment that makes the player feel that way when they play this character. Okay, so we've got a game that starts with some interaction with the world of nature. Then we have a brief domestic experience. We have sleeping Pollyann. Okay. Well, let's give us a little something to do with Pollyann. Let's we can say this. This is actually kind of cool. We can say, instead of waking Pollyann, say better let her sleep. She's like to start crying again. So there we go. That's nice. Well, then how about, oh, I don't know, kiss Pollyann. Ask Pollyann about hammer. Oops. Pollyann, how are you? There's so many different things that I could do. It would be a real pain for me to say, instead of waking Pollyann, say this. I could copy and paste, and I could, instead of kissing Pollyann, instead of asking Pollyann about something. So there's so many different things I could do. Let's instead do this. Instead of doing anything other than examining with Pollyann. And this means we don't want to say anything other than examining Pollyann. We want to do anything other than examining with Pollyann. Say, previously I said better let her sleep. I'm going to do leave her be, a little bit less general. Leave her be. She's like to. Oops. Okay. So now, when I do all those different things, I just get this general better leave her be and P-O-L-L-Y. Pollyann, how are you? Okay. All right. All these actions that I tried to do to Pollyann before now doesn't work. They're intercepted. But how about this? Let's we ought to do this. We ought to do a okay. And now, here we go. You tenderly kiss her forehead. You might say something like, I probably don't want her to respond there. She'd have to wake up, say something, and go back to sleep. Just let her tenderly kiss her forehead. Here we go. Without, how about this? Taking care not to wake her. So, the game will let me show affection for Pollyann. I feel like my character would do something like that, but the game is basically saying, nope, you're not supposed to wake her up, so I'm not going to. Okay. Inform 7 is smart enough to realize that throwing things at people is kind of violent, and so this "you lack the nerve" when it comes to the crucial moment is standard text that comes with Inform 7 that basically says, no, this is not a game where you smash people. Now, who knows? Maybe, with a starting thing like who needs steampunk, maybe John Henry eventually will smash something if you want to expand this game and take it in a direction that involves smashing people with a hammer, that's part of the fun of interactive fiction. You can kind of do whatever you want, as long as you take the time to code it. Okay, now let's create something for John Henry to do. We've set up the situation, and now we pretty much need to know, or now we pretty much know that he's got to go to work to earn that money. Now, I deliberately made the work camp to be southeast because most people will type north, south, east, west, and southeast is not a common direction that people will type, so I wanted to make sure that people would go into the cabin, interact with the objects in the cabin, learn a little bit more about the situation before heading down to the work camp. So, okay. Run it out southeast. The hum of men's voices and the percussion of their tools striking rock fill the valley with the music of labor. Shaker Jim pokes his knobby head around a corner. John Henry, Captain Tommy, say he want you, he says. He with that salesman again. Shaker Jim strolls off muttering. Captain Tommy's office is west. And of course, I haven't created Captain Tommy's office yet. So, let us create Captain Tommy's office. And I'm speeding up because I think by now you know what I'm doing. Okay. All right. Captain Tommy wears a boss man's tie but worker's boots. Okay. Remember, what's in these quoted passages does not affect the game world. It looks like I'm saying it twice, but here, this is eye candy for the reader. This is what actually makes objects that you can interact with. Now, this stuff, the boss man's tie and the worker's boots, that's not all that important. But if Salesman Pratt wears all this stuff, you might want to have a little bit of fun with the description of Salesman Pratt. So let's see how this is going. Let's see. Delete that. Okay, so that means the problem is that page. Captain Tommy wears a boss man's tie. Well, could it be the apostrophe S? No, doesn't like that. Aha! Okay. And, okay, I've got two different objects called boots. I'll call them work boots. And work boots. Blood. Boots, how about that? Give them a different. Okay, that's a start. And Fancy boots. How's that? Okay. All right, so the problem here was Inform 7 complained because I had something called work boots, and here it thought I was trying to say those same boots are on are being worn by two different people. So I just differentiated them. One is work boots, and probably boots. Let's see how that works. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, a little parallel there. Boss man's tie, but worker man's boots. There we go. So how's that work? Okay. And whoops, I accidentally pasted that in there. Let's get a fresh version of this. We'll go south. Take hammer. Southeast. West. Examine Captain Tommy. Examine Salesman Pratt. And here's a metal pipe stuck on for no reason. Okay, so these things in the description, long frock coat, brass buttons, lacy sleeves, mustache, monocle, I've created those as objects that Salesman Pratt is wearing. Okay, so we now have two characters that exist in Captain Tommy's office. They don't say much, they're not doing much. So I'm going to give some fancy stuff here. We'll do this. I'm going to say, here in Captain Tommy's office, oh, and by the way, here we have charts and papers cluttering the desk. I did not implement those things. I would if I had more time. I would do those things, but I think you already know how to do that. Now I'm going to add something so that I have it in two places. I'll go back east. Let me type my command over here where I'm going to go back east. And look at what happens. Shaker Jim pokes his knobby head around the corner again. Shaker Jim pokes his knobby head around the corner again. X Jim. He can't see him. It's because he doesn't exist as a character in the game world. He's just a bunch of text. But he keeps repeating this message, which gets to be pretty boring. So I'm going to add a little bit of code that will display this message just once. I think that'll work. Yep, okay, so here's what I did. Every location in the game world has a property called visited. If this property has not been visited, that is, it's the first time that we've entered this environment, then I print this text. This stuff is optional. We'll always see Captain Tommy's office is west, but we'll only see this the first time. So let's do something similar here. If unvisited, we'll have our little message here. Making sure these quotes all look right. Okay, so here we go. Go west, and we don't see this. Now we can do this. Here's a bit of an option. If unvisited, say this, see how that goes. Okay. Okay, if I go back northwest and then southeast again, we don't see Shaker Jim again. Go west, we get this longer message, and I can look, or I can go out. Oops, how about I go east and then west again? Now you see Captain Tommy and Salesman Pratt here. I probably can make them scenery if I'm going to mention them in this room description. And let me add a paragraph break. Here. And now let's run that again. Good. Okay, that seems to work. All right, well, if we had more time, we might have Captain Tommy tell John Henry, be at the opening of the Big Bend Tunnel at noon or something like that, and the game would continue. We might also give John Henry the chance to, he didn't, well, what happens if John Henry storms out of here, goes northwest, takes the hammer, goes southeast, west, and I don't know. Okay, well, how about I? Okay, you lack the nerve when it comes to the crucial moment. All right, well, how about I do this? Actions. It tells me it is throwing your 40-pound hammer at Salesman Pratt. That's what it is. So, instead of, I can abbreviate a little bit. And let's try that. There we go. And now we have the that wouldn't do no good. So, this section of the tutorial has shown you how to start with a transcript and move carefully through adding those details such as the initial description, the title card, the initial inventory, objects in the area that you can see and interact with, description for those objects, a couple other locations, and I've tried showing you ways that you can emphasize and de-emphasize objects in the game world, with a reminder that if you list 15 or 20 different nouns in the room, the player is going to be overwhelmed. You want to keep a handle on the handle like the hammer, the handle on the hammer. You got to keep control over the number of objects that you create in the game world, because every object that you create means more synonyms to create, more obvious actions to create. And, here, if I've got a throw hammer at Pratt, Captain Tommy, now it gives me that you lack the nerve when it comes to Crochum. And again, I can get rid of that actions off if I don't want to see it anymore. Well, instead of throwing a hammer at Pratt, why don't we just say at someone? And now, that I've corrected that typo, oops. Okay. Remember previously, all the other actions like, if I were to say touch, poly, it says better lever B. This is a more specific rule. Throwing a hammer at someone is more specific than just doing anything in particular, or doing nothing in particular with Polyam. So this rule gives, Inform 7 figures that this rule provides a more interesting, more specific, more personalized response. And the whole point of Inform 7 is to interrupt and replace the bland, boring things that Inform 7 will let you do, or at least Inform 7 responds, somewhat reasonably. If I were to, I don't know, eat table, it's kind of a reasonable response, but, why in the game world would I want to implement eating? It's boring. I think if you're an experienced interactive fiction player and you see somebody has left the default reaction that's hardly portable, you're figuring, okay, eating in this game is not important. This designer didn't bother to implement something about eating. But if I were to I don't know. Oh, here. Oh, I see. First, it figures I got to take the table. All right, well, how about I take the... Okay, here. Inform 7 realizes in order to eat something, you first have to take it. And it tried to take the table. So how about eat papers? Okay, there you go. Now, this command... Oops, and I got to put that bracket around the quotation mark, or around the apostrophe. And there we go. Okay, so if I try to eat the papers, maybe I'm hungry. Maybe later in the game, Pollyann will do something. Who knows? If I'm not expecting Pollyann actually to bring me my lunch, and food is not an important part of this game, I should just leave it out and let that default message that's plainly inedible, that's hardly portable. These things are just basically saying, no, don't waste your time with this. I left the boring default responses. I'm not going to do much else with it. Okay, well, I have some more advanced code that I will post that you can explore on your own, and you are welcome to steal, borrow anything in this code to build your own story. I'm fine with that. If you are feeling daring, the documentation does. I told you before, it's really not designed for beginning programmers, But let's what if I want to create a locked container? Well, locks and keys. There happens to be a whole chapter on locks and keys. And I'm going to save this. I'm going to start a new project, and I'm going to show you if you want to experiment with something in Inform 7. Here's how what I would recommend. Start with a new game. We can go to the Inform recipe book. And if I want to do something with, here we go, props, food, clothing, money, television, radios, bags, bottles, boxes, and safes. Okay, here we go. The strong box is a locked container. So what if I make a, I don't know, a white room is a room. I can grab the strong box is a locked container. The little steel key unlocks the strong box. I have to write and now I can run that. Aha. I have to close the strong box in order to lock it. I was going to try to lock the key in the strong box. Interesting that Inform 7 won't let me do that. Anyway, Inform 7 is smart enough to understand things like locks and keys. And here where it says the little steel key unlocks the strong box, that just basically says if the player uses the little steel key, that will unlock the strong box. This message right here does not in the game world do anything. Notice I don't have to type anything like after the player unlocks the strong box, now the strong box is unlocked. I don't have to do any of that. I can, however, do things like strong box is transparent. So let's run that. Aha! So we have a transparent strong box, and I can see the ruby in it. Can't take the ruby because the ruby is in the strong box. Seems to be locked. Well, how about I lock strong box? Well, duh, Inform 7. I want to unlock. Okay. So, locks are something fun. Put the lock in a hidden place, or put the key in a hidden place. Put something interesting in a lockbox. That's something interesting that you can do as well. The documentation has a lot to explore. Conversation with characters. Here, let me show you. I just happen to remember that a character talks about peanuts. Okay. This is some excellent code that will show you how to have a character talk. So let's bring this example. Okay. So really, again, if I just select this, delete it all, come over here to the documentation, click this thing, that whole chunk of text. It's a little mini working game that demonstrates conversation. Here's Aunt Martha. I can say, Martha, hello. Humph, said Aunt Martha. The game world mentions your shuttle awaits. All right. About airplanes. Aha. I'm going to add the word airplanes in there. And now when we rerun it, when I ask Martha about airplanes, she has a little wistful memory. So let's go over here and take a look at this code. It should be pretty easy to add something in here. The thing to note is, it's a little bit weird when you see that. This text right here, airplane, that's actually a continuation of this line over here. So if we get this even wider, you can see what I'm talking about. So it's a little bit wonky here, but it's actually pretty easy. Let's ask Martha about informing interactive fiction. She says, she'll say, right. I've used a tab here. I've put 3 different words that are going to be prompts, and when you type this prompt, then this response happens. Let's see how I did. Okay. Let's Okay, so I've just shown you 2 very quick extra tools. This conversation tool is one of them. Feel free to throw it into your own game if you wish. This is kind of complex, but fortunately you can start with this program and start with this code and build on it and do whatever you wish. Okay, so speaking to you from the Empyrean Shuttle Bay. Okay, so you've had quite a lot to think about, quite a lot to look at, and I hope you have some happy time programming your own interactive story using Inform 7.